All right, it is safe to say that Over Your Dead Body delivered on my two favorite C's: comedy and carnage. Over Your Dead Body is directed by Jorma Deacon, starring Jason Segel and Samara Weaving. The movie basically is about Jason Segel's character and Samara Weaving's character are both married, and they're not in a happy marriage. You're kind of getting a little bit of a look at it, and you can tell that they're not the biggest fans of each other anymore. So that being said, Jason Segel's character decides to, hey, let's go on a little trip up north. Let's go to the cabin. So they do that, and little do you know that Jason Segel's character and Samara Weaving's character are both planning on killing each other. So that's basically the setup of this movie, and that's what you kind of know going into it. You're expecting to have a blast with that premise because it's directed by Jorma Deacon, who is a comedian director at heart and was part of the Lonely Island SNL digital skits back in the day. So like I said before, the comedy is well delivered here. Even during that setup in the movie of them just going back and forth, their chemistry, the way the dialogue is written between Samara Weaving's character and Jason Segel's character, it's just witty, it's laugh out loud funny, and you just have a good time with it. So even if the pacing does take a little bit to get that setup going, to get a little bit of that movie off and flying, you're still having a good time because it's just very well written, and there's a lot of jokes that ultimately I haven't laughed or chuckled in the theater like that in a while. So setup is great in that regards. Another positive that this film has with the script, besides that great witty dialogue, is that there's little elements in the movie that you kind of see, whether it's a TV screen or something that you kind of just question. I don't want to give anything too away, but there's some moments where there's stuff that happens that you really don't not pay attention to, but you don't really think nothing of until later on it's revealed why that happened, which is always a cool thing to see in stories that are well written. Little sparks like that have a little payoff later, or you see why they're set up later. So that's always a good time to see. And like previously mentioned, Samara Weaving and Jason Segel's character, they do have really good chemistry. Samara Weaving's great in this. She definitely plays with her strengths here, and that's one of the things I was upset about actually in Scream 6, was that I think she would have been very well utilized as a main character in the Scream franchise instead of just like an opening kill. That was wasted talent right there. That being said, though, her 5-6 minutes of screen time in that movie was amazing anyways. So what can you do? But that being said, it was kind of cool seeing her play something a little bit different here. She's really well known in Ready or Not 2, The Babysitter, kind of getting her feet into the horror scream queen status. But here she's kind of playing, has that same kind of tone, but a little bit different, and also lets the English accent out to play too. So her first line of dialogue, I was like, oh, wow, that's the Samara Weaving we're getting. Cool. Jason Segel is great as always. He's a really funny guy. One of his strengths actually are matching his facial expressions with the line of dialogue he's saying. So as he's throwing out funny jokes, funny sayings, his facial expressions just enhance it to an S tier level status of comedy. That being said, the film does switch up a little bit around the 30-40 minute mark, I'd say, and it delivers us into a story that we're like, okay, I can get down with. That being said, too, I thought that was really great and a really cool switch of pace, just because as much as I loved Samara Weaving and Jason Segel's characters and their chemistry and even like the dialogue between them, I don't think there was really enough there to have that same back and forth between them for an hour and 50 minutes. So yeah, like that being said, I was like, okay, if they're going to be trying to kill each other, we're going to be watching that for an hour and 50 minutes. I don't know if there was enough meat on the bones per se to go on that journey, but like I mentioned, something does happen that kind of switches the story around a little bit and sends us off in a different direction. And that's where a little bit more of that carnage and comedy ensue even more. So that the tone pace was a great change up and allowed the story to develop a little bit more. That being said, speaking of great characters, Paul Guilfoyle in this, who plays Jason Segel's character's dad, is very funny. Like, he had the whole theater and myself cracking up whenever he was on screen. So he was the epitome and definition of a scene stealer. A couple other names show up in this movie too. Keith Jardine, Timothy Olyphant, and Juliette Lewis both appear in this movie. I won't go too much into their roles or how so. They are shown a little bit in the trailer, so it's not too much of a spoiler. but I'll keep that side of the story a little bit of a surprise. With that being said, it was great seeing Juliette Lewis show up again. I'm familiar with her in movies such as California and From Dusk Till Dawn. She's always been great in movies like this, and she delivers a great performance here as well. And now to the Carnage, which was just a lot of fun. And the cool thing too with the Carnage, it's not like that in your face blood that you get in horror. Not a lot of there is blood and there is gore, but it's done in a way that's not really meant to horrify you. It's done in ways that get you to have like a vocal expression, like "oh shit, what?" And it plays to its strengths too. So as much batshit crazy carnage that's going on, it's all done in a comedic manner. At times it gets a little bit tense and tension filled, just to get you on the edge of your seat a little bit. And it does, offer those thrills and suspense. But at the end of the day, the carnage here is done in ways that evoke laughter, evoke that holy shit that just happened kind of moment. And there's one scene in particular that boom, carnage, and I was like, oh, whoa, so it was a lot of fun in that regards. The theater's packed. You're going to have probably even a greater time with this than just watching this, by yourself at home streaming or in a smaller, less filled theater. So definitely worth checking this out on opening weekend, just for hopes of a really packed house to have that shared experience with, because when the carnage goes off, it goes off. So there's a lot of praise for this film. It's one of those films that you can't really get too nitpicky about for its flaws or its negatives, because I think everything it did was really well handled. Like I mentioned earlier, those little twists, those little setups that were paid off later was really cool to see. The chemistry between all the characters were great. Witty jokes, witty dialogue, a lot of good laughs. The only biggest thing I can see being a little negative for me personally was, about 20-30 minutes in, it's not obvious enough where the film is going per se for the ending, but it's kind of like you kind of know what's going to happen. You kind of know the character arcs that are going to ensue. It's kind of easy, I should say. It's kind of easy to guess where these character arcs are going to go. It's kind of easy to kind of tell where it's going. With that being said, it's still a blast watching those characters go from point A to point B, watching the story go from point A to point B. So it's not the biggest flaw negative, but at the end of the day, it is a little bit predictable. But at the same time, with that predictability it has, it's still great at offering twists and turns that you don't see coming. And to get to that predictable place that you kind of know where those character arcs are going to go, it goes there in different ways that you probably wouldn't see coming. So that's one of the cool things about this film. All in all, I did have a blast with it. It's a very good, I guess they labeled it as a horror comedy. Like I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of carnage, so that's probably where the horror comes from, because it takes those horror tropes of gore, violence. But I would say this is more of a thriller comedy. There's not really too much scares in this per se. But at the end of the day, yeah, this was a great film. Definitely recommend checking this out in a theater. And you'll have a lot of fun with this one if you kind of like those comedies that just go batshit crazy. All right, and that is my little review here on Over Your Dead Body. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to give it a like, subscribe for more great content. And as always, keep watching those movies, because those movies won't watch themselves.